less than a month, all eyes turn to California and the original home of the CrossFit Games, the Ranch in Aromas, as 5 men compete for the crown of fittest on earth. One man is on a collision course with history, and 4 men have the tall task of stopping him. Canada's Jeffrey Adler is the only non-American in the field and continues his career best year that started way back in October of 2019. The fittest man in Canada in the Open will now carry the Maple Leaf all the way to Aromas, earning his place in the final 5 behind a pair of 6th place finishes in Friendly Fran and Nasty Nancy. Samuel Quant was the athlete that few saw coming, but even fewer managed to close the competition better than the 4-time qualifier out of the Northwest. Quant followed his worst finish of the weekend in Damn Diane with a 3rd place in the row, 8th in Nasty Nancy, 3rd in the handstand hold, and 7th in Awful Annie to seat himself squarely in the top 5 and earn himself a career best finish at the Games for a 2nd year in a row. When it comes to the next generation of men at the CrossFit Games, look no further than 21-year-old Justin Medeiros. 10 months after winning the Filthy 150 in Ireland to open the sanctional season, the Lodi, California native displayed poise and fitness well beyond his years by going toe-to-toe with the best in the sport. With top 4 finishes in Nasty Nancy, the Max Front Squat, and Awful Annie, the rookie proved he can grapple with the big boys and has a legitimate shot at leaving Aromas with some hardware. What a difference a year makes for Noah Olsen. In 2019, the big question was, can he finally make a CrossFit Games podium? Fast forward a year and the reigning 2nd fittest man on earth is in prime position to make the podium in back-to-back years after a pair of 2nd place finishes in Friendly Fran and Damn Diane, and an event win in the handstand hold made sure we'll be getting some Miami heat at the Ranch in October. And they'll all be chasing who else but 4-time reigning fittest man on earth, Matt Fraser, on his quest to stand alone in the history books with his 5th consecutive CrossFit Games title. Fraser showed no signs of slipping en route to 4 event wins in all 4 named workouts in Stage 1. And just in case that wasn't enough, the champ sprinkled in a 20-pound PR in the front squat to add some spice to the 168-point roasting he gave the rest of the field on his way to yet another win. Less than a month, it all goes down starting October 19th as Stage 2 of the 2020 CrossFit Games kicks off live from the Ranch in Aromas, California.
Welcome back to a special edition of The Bottom Line. Justin LoFranco and Tommy Marquez are here. How's it going, guys?
Good day. Talking about CrossFit.
Talking about CrossFit. And we are just a couple weeks away from figuring out what will happen with the final 5, looking at the men's side of the competition. I mean, guys, what can we expect, do you think?
Ooh, man. Well, besides the elephant in the room, and I think that's, Fraser licking his chops at all the fresh meat he's going to get at the ranch coming up in a few weeks. I'm expecting a few things. I think we're going to see the next chapter in a rising star, one in Justin Medeiros. I think Justin and I have had some conversations offline about this as well. And I think if there's one person that I think that really stands to benefit from this new format and this situation, it's him. You start looking at some of the factors, right? There's the crowds, the atmosphere. Yeah, sure, he might feed off of that. He's done well at sanctionals before, but there's a lot less distractions. It's a little bit more intimate, and you're talking about a guy that's used to, coming up as a wrestler in Lodi. He's used to wrestling in a lunchroom with just a handful of dudes, just working it out, and that's honestly, what you're really going to get here, there's a small collection of athletes, very intimate setting, working out at the ranch, basically at whatever this crazy programming madman throws at you. And I think for him, he's 2 hours from home. I mean, it's a short drive just to show up to the ranch. He's that central belt of California is where he was born and raised. And I think he's just going to be right at home at the ranch. And he doesn't have to concern himself per se with trying to beat the Noah Olsens and the Matt Frasers of the world. He just has to stay ahead of at least 2 guys every time. And he's all but guaranteed a podium spot. So I think that's a very manageable chunk for a Games rookie, and one that I think has about a decade's worth of CrossFit competition ahead of him.
Yeah, I think pretty much everybody here is playing for second place. Now, I don't want to take away from the fitness of the other 4 guys because they're extremely fit. I wouldn't even come close to comparing myself to them, but Fraser is just so much more dominant. And we showed that. Tommy, you're the sort of the genesis of this statistic we were talking about at the end of the recap for stage 1. And, we published this yesterday, and we took a look at these numbers, and we sort of reshuffled the leaderboard with the new scoring rubric for the 5-person format. And we only compared the performances of stage 1 for the 5 athletes that are going to go on to compete in Aromas. And, Fraser was dominant before and became even more dominant in comparison to his peers. He's going to have in Aromas, he increased his margin of victory from 168 points to 235. And Tommy, as you pointed out, the only thing that separated him from a complete and total clean sweep were 12 pounds on the front squat, 1.9 seconds on the row, and 2 seconds on the handstand hold. And that is the big differentiator between 7 straight wins for Matt Fraser. And that's not an encouraging sign if you're the other 4 athletes.
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of touch on that too, right? Like something that wasn't talked about a ton last year is, everyone talks about how Noah gave him such a good push at the games. But if you really take a look at it, the only events that he beat Matt in were a sprint couplet, a sprint couplet, Mary, which Matt finished second and 2 reps behind, and the sprint and the swim paddle. So Noah, being a water polo player, very well adept in the water, we've seen Matt toggle between really strong performances in the swim as well, and beating Noah to Noah beating him back and forth. So I think that's a little bit closer race. But then outside of that, it's 2 reps in Mary, and then beating him in 2 events in the sprint and sprint couplet that were matters of seconds, right?
Yep.
In all of the longer, meaningful CrossFit style events, Matt, wiped the floor with. I mean, he was 15 places ahead of him in first cut, 6 places ahead of him in second cut, 7 places ahead of him in the ruck with a penalty. And then obviously that 3, almost, I call it like amen corner for if anyone that's familiar with golf, there's a 3-hole series at the Masters in Augusta that are basically the kind of the centerpiece of the weekend. And that's what the sprint couplet, Mary, and sprint were for Noah. So outside of that little centerpiece right there in the middle, then Matt basically beats him in the clean, beats him in ringer 1, ringer 2, and the standard. So I think as much as we give credit to Noah for a great performance and pushing Matt, which he deserves, I think in the long-term metrics, Matt is still just so far ahead of the rest of the field.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think that the only reason why we look at that performance as such a run for his money, or whatever you want to call it, is because the juxtaposition of swapping out leader jerseys with times where he's 200, 300 points ahead is like, okay, this is maybe the closest anyone is going to get to touching him or pushing him or whatever you want to call it. So I'm curious what you guys think the shakeup on the leaderboard will be once we get to Ramos with the final 5 and, this scoring system and the point system that we're using. Like, can we expect another 300-point lead, or is it going to be the kind of thing where we're looking at swapping leader jerseys and we're looking at perhaps a still dominating performance, but not a clean sweep the way we've seen before?
I think, look, what we did is purely an academic exercise by reshuffling the leaderboard for the top 5 and comparing their performances to stage 1. So it's purely academic, but there are 7 events there and he's already ahead by 200 and something odd points. I got to be honest, like, I don't think that bodes well when you're having a 10, 11, and 12 event competition. And it also doesn't bode well when you have to beat Fraser to go on and you're one of these 4 athletes, because the only way to do this is you're going to have to accumulate wins. If you have only one other athlete accumulating wins, it's beating Fraser outright, then there's no way you're going to beat Fraser, because the guy who wins half of the events at that point is going to end up winning the whole CrossFit Games.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a 25-point differential between first and second, 100 to 75, and then it goes down by 20 points after that. There's just sort of this little unknown there where CrossFit released a /0 at the end of an event. Perhaps that's for not meeting a minimum work requirement. We're not sure yet, but let's put that one aside for a second. The increment, you get a 25-point separation between first and second, which is 5 points more than the other events. If you don't have guys coming up and winning and like sending it for that event, you honestly, if I was the other 4 athletes right now, I'd be like, guys, we're gonna have to go at this together, because if Noah or Justin or Adler's the only other person that wins a handful of events up there ain't no chance. He's gonna be ahead by 400 or 500 points at that point. There's no possible statistical way to catch up to him. I mean, he could basically walk in for the rest of the events and then he would end up with a win.
Yeah. And honestly, that lack of point differential is what hurt Matt last year at the games, because he came out and won both of those events, and he had such a minuscule lead that he's basically saw evaporated in one event in the sprint couplet, just by virtue of the fact that it was later on down the line and more people had gotten cut, so the point spread out a little bit more. So
when you have 150 athletes competing, the point spread isn't very much. But when you have 5, it's like, oh shoot, man, you give them the first 3 and it's like, see you later, guys.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you look at the first day, basically first day and a half of the CrossFit Games last year. Like, yeah, Matt finished the ruck in 17th, but if you take that penalty away, he's basically top 10. And then you're looking at Noah, who was 24th in that event, Scott Panchik 41st, BKG 16th. So even some of the great athletes that are perennially in the top 5 weren't hanging with him in that event anyways. So it's possible that we could see Matt come out of the gates hard, and it's certainly I would say a decent strategy. You come out, win the first 3-4 events early in the week, you build up that extra 5-point buffer of point separation comparative to the rest of the field, and then you sit back and know that really on any given test at this point, if you stack those 5 guys against each other, Matt's never going to take a third for the most part, barring some crazy turn of events. So he can just sit back and rack up seconds and never finish lower than second. And he's built up enough of point buffer early on in the weekend that it doesn't matter.
Okay, so if you're a Final 5 guy and you're not Matt Fraser, are you getting to Aroma saying, this is my fight for second? Or are you still mentally, do you have to go and hit the floor being like, I can take this guy, this is my chance?
That's a great question. That's got to be I think that's a question that the coach if I were a coach of an athlete and I knew the athlete well enough, I'd say, look, man, you're going to have to bleed and die to beat Matt Fraser. And if you're going into this competition prepared to bleed and die, then go for it. But if you're not, they cash that money, get a great position going into the next season, set yourself up professionally for next season, and then go into training and then beat him next year. But if you're not willing to die and to bleed on the field for this and go for wins, then go for second place. That's what I would tell my athlete. But
well, I would say that, like, at this point, if you every single one of these athletes, I mean, I'm going to take Matt and Noah out of the equation here. Let's talk about the remaining 3, because I think Matt and Noah are going to come in with that mindset that I'm coming to win, and I've been in this position before, and it's another year, same story kind of situation.
It's mine for the taking, basically.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So I think the other 3 athletes at this point, if you're looking left and right and you're like, there's only 5 of us, I've earned my place at this point, and I'm at the ranch. This is probably never going to happen again. Anything less than a mindset of saying, like, I'm coming to I'm coming to make, what is that? They say, if you make God bleed, people cease to believe in him. And it's like, that's that like war mentality you got to come into, right? And you have to, and then you have to triage accordingly. Where is that going to be that moment where I'm going to make that charge? It may not be the whole competition. It may not be every event. But if you're Jeffrey Adler and I see a heavy barbell workout, I'm like, that's my moment. If I see Samuel Kwon and there's like the medium to low rep, something like a double DT that we've seen at the games that he's won before, I'm going to make that move. If I'm Justin Medeiros and it's something gritty, down in the dirt, some running, some adaptability type stuff that he excels at, moving your body in different planes, I'm going to attack that. And it's very similar to what we saw with James Newberry last year in the ringer events.
Mm-hmm.
He picked his spot. He got 100 points. He got a payday on top of it. And it actually netted him out more points in the long run than he would have just taking 2 middle of the road finishes. And I think that's the kind of mindset that like, hey, I may not get every single one, but I'm going to take my best. I'm going to pick my spot, take my best shot, and I'm going to leave it all into that straight right hand haymaker and see if it lands.
Well, guys, I think that time moves especially slowly between phases 1 and 2 of the 2020 games, because I feel like we've already been saying this for a little while, but we are just a couple weeks away and time is creeping by. So very much looking forward to
19 days.
19 to be exact, and feeling like it's been 19 days this whole time, unfortunately. So looking forward to seeing how it all shakes out. Thank you guys for lending your opinions here.
Thank
and we will do this again next week on The Bottom Line.